quick warning, this video contains major spoilers for practically all seasons of Dexter. If you're okay with that, grab some popcorn or pickles or whatever snack you prefer and please, enjoy.
I'm sure Special Ops taught you to rattle your captor, but I should warn you, Sergeant, you can't play on my feelings. I don't have any.
Are you sure about that?
Greetings and salutations, my friend. Dexter is so back. I'm happy. I'm pretty damn satisfied. But could I ask for more? Perhaps? Yeah? You know, I still remember very fondly the days when me and my mom would watch the original show where it was airing, and I absolutely loved the first 5 seasons. After that, I think it was going downhill, and I absolutely hated New Blood. And I don't hide my very negative feelings towards that show or season. And because of that, I was rather skeptical towards both Resurrection and Original Sin, and both series managed to surprise me in a very positive way. And now, when Resurrection was airing every week, me and my mom would talk on the phone about the last episode, what happened, and our theories and what was going to happen next. I want to share my thoughts on Dexter Resurrection before I go to the main topic of this video, even though this video isn't necessarily meant to be a review, but my thoughts on Resurrection just perfectly lead into the main subject that I want to focus on. Alright, it's too hot. Gotta take it off. And my clothes are off. At least my hoodie. Not all my clothes, you pervert. Anyway, if you're a Dexter fan, consider subscribing, because I plan to rank every single episode of Dexter we had so far. And I'll start working on that soon, and I'll make this video ready at least before the end of this year. So, it is not my intention to shit all over this show, Dexter Resurrection, especially since I think it's so good that we've got something decent in this Dexter universe. However, I don't think I would be completely genuine if I didn't share my issues I had with this show, and some of these issues are small, such as the rushed ending, or the beginning of this show basically being a plot armor fest, where the writers basically wrote themselves into a corner in the last season, and, well, there was no meaningful way out of it, so they just had to bullshit their way out of it. Which is sort of what Dexter does too, which is kind of suitable, really. And you know, I'm so grateful that in Resurrection they made Harrison likable, because I couldn't stand him in New Blood. And I would also say they made Dexter actually likable in this season, because I also didn't necessarily like Dexter in New Blood. It was following this sort of trope when they bring back characters and they're just not very likable, you know? Luke Skywalker being a perfect example of that. And I think that the Dexter in Dexter New Blood falls in that specific category for me, where I just didn't feel it, you know, like, and I understand the position he was in at that point in his life. However, I sort of like the direction Dexter is taking in this new season, but what really bothers me is that the writers are acting as if Dexter is discovering his humanity for the first time.
Only to find out you're a murderous psychopath, and you never actually felt anything for him.
Why does his death hurt so much?
Because you're still listening to your fake dad.
I just think that we've been there, done that. It's been done so many times. This conflict. Am I a monster? Or am I not a monster? Am I something more? It's getting old at this point. For instance, episode 3 of Dexter Resurrection. We see Dexter going after Red, the dark passenger, following him, doing a little bit of research, and he gets involved to stop him from getting into that cab to save the driver, who would possibly be Red's another victim. And Harry, the voice of Harry in his head, this ghost of Harry, which is sort of a monologue that is happening in Dexter's head, that tells him, you put yourself out to save someone. This is new for you. But I'm thinking, is it? Is it? Or is it absolute horseshit? And we don't have to look that far for other examples. Because in just New Blood, Dexter, when he was suspicious about this podcaster who he thought was onto him, discovered that she was actually onto Kurt Caldwell. And so he went down to his basement where Kurt would keep his victims before he would ultimately dispose of them, and basically inserts himself into that situation to stop her from being harmed. Now, he didn't have to do that, but he did, right? He chose to save her, risking exposing himself to Kurt Caldwell, risking that Caldwell would get suspicious of him. What about a situation in season 4, where Dexter chose to save a child instead of going after Trinity? Also, a certain sacrifice, a certain risk he took, where he actually prioritized someone else's well-being over his own lust for blood. And so it baffles me that Harry there would say, oh, that's something new. I've never seen that from you, right? And then there's, throughout the season, Dexter is again acting like he doesn't have feelings, right? But we've been there. We're supposed to sort of buy into the idea that he's now sort of starting to feel things towards his son, Harrison. And also, when Batista died, like, this grief Dexter was experiencing was something new. And I think perhaps if you haven't been watching Dexter for a very, very long time and jumped in again and you perhaps don't remember all the details, it might make sense. But if you watch it all in one go, there are just pieces of the puzzles that don't fit together. In the very final episode of New Blood, Dexter said that he never loved anyone, but he might just feel love for Harrison, for his son. And this is the first time he feels love. Now, what the hell is the situation with Dexter's feelings? Either his inability to feel them, or ability to do experience them, in fact. And how this direction that I think Resurrection would take in the future seasons is kind of problematic when it comes to the overall arc of this character. And I think in order to understand Dexter on an emotional level, we have to go all the way back.
Tonight's the night. And it's going to happen again and again. Has to happen.
In the very first episode of Dexter, Dexter introduces himself as someone who doesn't have any feelings. At some point he says that if he did have feelings, he would feel something for his sister, Deb, suggesting that even though he's theoretically unable to feel, he has some sort of appreciation of his sister. However, in this same episode, Dexter claims that he's someone who's really good at faking human behavior. And this is interesting to me, because he claims to be good at fitting in and faking behavior, but when you actually watch the show, you might realize that Dexter is extremely awkward in a lot of situations. And I think it's best if I just show you. So here's just a couple of clips to give you an example of what I mean.
I was wondering what you were doing, sitting here by yourself for so long. Now I see.
I paid her to say that.
You did?
No, I was just kidding.
Me too. Whoa.
Cody, what's that?
Aster, what's that?
Oh my God, Dexter!
What's the matter with you? It's X's and O's.
Like tic-tac-toe?
Can't let them steal our women now, can we? No, they're our women.
I'm having intimate relations with La Vuelta.
Congratulations.
I love you, bro, but sometimes you're a fucking tard.
Yeah, I know.
Now, what does it tell us about the character of Dexter? It seems like he's someone who doesn't fully understand himself or know himself and evaluates himself in a wrong way. It's in a sort of Dunning-Kruger fashion, where he believes he's much better at something than he actually is.
I am the #1 most impactful artist of our generation. I am Shakespeare in the flesh.
And so, if he's unable to correctly evaluate himself in that context, could it also be that he's unable to evaluate his ability to experience human emotions? Now, season 1 is probably the coldest Dexter we ever got, and a lot of people love this Dexter. Some fans actually wanted that Dexter back, you know, this Dexter who's not controlled by his feelings, who's just fully focused on the hunt. He doesn't really show that many emotions throughout the first season, naturally. And watching just the first season, you might be convinced that Dexter is someone with antisocial personality disorder, or psychopathy, or sociopathy. Eventually, however, in episode 6, we see Dexter sort of worrying about something. You could say he's experiencing mild symptoms of anxiety, and he doesn't really understand why he's feeling that, and he doesn't understand what he is feeling in that moment. And so his reaction is,
What's happening to me?
and this becomes more apparent when later in the season he's starting to regain memories of his childhood, his traumatic childhood experience when his mother died in front of him. And we see a rather emotional response in episode 8 when he runs out of the shrink's office, when those memories first come to the surface. Now, why I'm saying that this is an emotional reaction, because his emotional reaction right there is to block it. And he's, in that scene, he's physically running away, but he's also metaphorically running away from his feelings, because they are just too much to handle. It's not that unusual for many people with trauma to run away from it. Myself, going through a surgery and complications that have affected me for a very long time, I found myself that it was much easier to actually not feel it, to escape, than to actually deal with it and to feel that, because it was just too much. And could it be that Dexter is an example of that what Dexter is actually experiencing is post-traumatic stress disorder that made him block those feelings? Well, there's a reason to suspect that, especially considering that once Dexter actually examines those memories and he realizes what happened, when he goes back to that red room full of blood that his brother Brian left for him, he says, I'm unable to feel, because if I ever felt anything, it would be this. And that is a classic example of repressed feelings and repressed memories that are a result of post-traumatic stress disorder. However, the first example of more strong feelings we see in Dexter is the feeling of panic that he's experiencing when his sister Deb is kidnapped by Ice Truck Killer, or Dexter's brother. At this point, you must start questioning whether what Dexter initially told us is actually true. Or maybe it is true from his point of view because he has repressed his feelings so deeply that he actually genuinely believed that. Add to this the fact that Harry literally raised him to believe that he is incapable of having those feelings. And it seems to me that Dexter was just so deeply conditioned into believing that, assuming that truth to himself, that when he says this to us, audience, as a narrator, he doesn't lie to us. He tells us what he's genuinely believing. At the moment when he, in the final episode of season 1, kills his brother to protect Deb, he's feeling internal pain, but he's not completely aware of how he should handle it, what to do with it. So we kind of see him start to experience it, but it goes away. It goes away because he just doesn't know what to do with it. It's like when you receive an information you're not ready to process, you won't form any thoughts on it. If I was to go to a 6-year-old and tell him something about Immanuel's Kant categorical imperative, that kid would probably go, okay. Like, he wouldn't know what to do with that information because he hasn't undergo the journey into understanding that, which might happen at some point in the future. And so we see Dexter, he is struggling with that feeling of pain. Like, okay, what is it? Yeah, I'm certainly feeling something. I think he doesn't probably even think it hurts, but it does hurt him in that moment. But how does he handle it? So he handles it the only way he knows. He rejects it. He, once again, runs away. But he doesn't run away completely because in some way he carries that with him, which is shown in a really, really nice way in the very first episode of season 2, and Dexter is literally counting the days and hours, perhaps even minutes and seconds, if I remember correctly. Well, maybe not seconds, but minutes maybe, since he killed his brother. Probably because that kill had much deeper meaning to him than any death before him. And while he tries to explain to us, an audience, as if he hasn't killed for so long and he's missing that killing, he's probably also missing his brother in some strange way.
Miss me, brother?
Even though he knows his brother we had to get rid of him, right? He was a danger to Deb. There was no way he would let him alive unless he would agree to leave Deb alone, which is just not something I think would happen. Throughout the second season, we see Dexter developing more impulsive emotions. While first shown in episode 11 of season 1, when he impulsively knocks Paul out with a frying pan.
I have to hurt.
Harry's first rule was don't get emotionally involved.
In season 2, we see more of that, especially in his relationship with Lila. So in season 1, we know that Dexter is in relationship with Rita in order to appear normal. It's more of a relationship with convenience rather than anything, at least at the start. In season 2, we see Dexter being more involved in those impulsive, rather spicy, sexual, perhaps slightly romantic feelings with Lila. And it's just something we don't see him doing with Rita. Eventually he sort of learns to engage sexually with Rita. Perhaps he even starts to enjoy it. Here's another thing he told us in the very first season, when he sort of introduces himself as completely uninterested in sex, not understanding why people are so crazy about sex. But later on he goes on to like it, and showing us that perhaps there are many things he misunderstood about himself. Another example of more impulsive feelings is also when he starts getting angry with Lila. Especially when she goes after Batista, but he also expresses some frustration of his situation at work, right, where he's about to be exposed as a Bayharbor butcher, the name that they called him. And so I think there's this really great scene with season 2 with Lila, where Dexter she says, like, he told me to feel my feelings, and she says, yes, but now I'm telling you to control it. So now we're in this category where those repressed feelings that Dexter has sort of been unpacked, but now they're becoming sort of a chaos. Like, how am I handling this, right? Because this is new to me. This is basically what happens with many teenagers, right? Because puberty comes with a set of certain feelings, certain experiences that many of us will not have in childhood. And so it can be a rather challenging phase for some of us to handle all that. Dexter, in some ways, is going through his emotional puberty in season 2, while still convinced that he has no feelings. He's still sticking to that original thing he told us. It's especially apparent in his conversation with Dokes, when Dokes is locked in a cage in Santos Jimenez's cabin.
I'm sure special ops taught you to rattle your captor, but I should warn you, Sergeant, you can't play on my feelings. I don't have any.
Oh, really? Who's lying now?
Then, later on in season 3, we learn that Dexter is going to be a father. And here's another feeling Dexter is experiencing at this point, which might have been new to him. I think he sort of felt it probably during the Bayharbor Butcher manhunt. Fear. Although that might have been more of a panic. There was definitely frustration, as we've explored in that scene with Lila. But now he's experiencing a very different kind of fear. Like, wow, I'm going to be a father. What kind of a father am I going to be if I kill people? Right? So there's worry, there's concern, and there's that fear. This is basically Dexter's journey throughout season 3, accepting that he's going to be a father and that he wants to be as good as of a father to this child as possible. But there's also this conflict, because how am I gonna do that if I am who I am? What am I going to leave behind for this child? What am I going to teach them? What sort of wisdom will I transfer to them? And so we see that what was originally a cover, a relationship of convenience, sort of becomes true. Now, I don't think Dexter ever had those impulsive feelings of falling in love with Rita, as we see in examples with Lila, as well as some later examples which are even more apparent. But he's sort of growing to appreciate her rather deeply, because I think love manifests itself in very, very different ways, and there are many different ways to functioning relationships. And culturally, we believe that ideally relationships should start with dating and falling in love and all of that. And it's a cultural aspect that we expect that those sexual feelings should be the first and eventually lead to something deeper. However, I think we can go to something more deeper without this romantic falling in love path, and this is exactly what I think we're seeing Dexter doing, where he becomes a family man without that path, because he started somewhere else completely. For him it was just a relationship of convenience. And so we arrive at the same point, but at the same time there is something deeply pathological about this, because, well, Dexter is a serial killer first and foremost, but also he is sort of emotionally stunted in a way that he has repressed his feelings and he doesn't understand them. And for this reason, I don't think he arrived at this point consciously, as it would be for most like platonic love examples. It just happened more accidentally, you could say. I don't even think it was Dexter's intention, but it sort of happened. you would think that from this point Dexter will grow to express his feelings even more, considering the growth that happened throughout all 4 seasons so far. However, at the very end of season 4 and at the beginning of season 5, when Rita dies, Dexter sort of reverts back to that initial reaction of running away from his feelings, being unable to experience them. And I think it's because he never felt pain this deep. And so just like in the case with his brother, he didn't know how to express it. We're back there. It didn't really much matter that he made this progress, because here's the thing: whenever it comes to any sort of progress that is dealing with feelings and mental health, you can always go back to where you started. But you're not there, you see. You're here, you're down here, but you're moving up from here at a faster rate than back then. But you can always end up there when you find yourself in a situation that is overwhelming. And just what the hell is more overwhelming than a death of a loved one, a death of a wife, a family member? And not just any death, but a death that is so abrupt and violent. And we see this in this very, very beautiful scene almost at the very end of season 4, right before the tragic ending, when Dexter's looking at that moon, when he's getting rid of Trinity's body, chopped up into many pieces. And he's looking at this moon and wondering if Rita is looking at that same moon at that same time. It's almost poetic, you could say. And again, I don't think those are feelings of sexual romantic nature. What I think Dexter is experiencing here is deep platonic love, which I don't think is any lower or any higher on the hierarchy of value than romantic or sexual relationships. I just think they're different. They're not necessarily better, worse, or more or less important, as I talked in my video on relationship anarchy. In some way, I think it's comparable to the feelings he has for his sister at this point. I think Deb and Rita are sort of in the same category, even though he engages sexually with Rita and he doesn't engage sexually with his sister. That would be weird, although where direction is going in season 6, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. And once again, he finds himself stunted, not knowing how to express it. And so the first episode of season 5 is really Dexter's battle against that wall that prohibits him from expressing it, from feeling it, right? And we see him eventually crashing through that wall when he kills that guy in the bathroom, the random dude who is a bit of a dick, and just starts screaming. And honestly, I fucking love that scene. I think it's one of the best scenes in all of Dexter. It's one of my favorite scenes when he just starts screaming like that.
It's okay, son. To show what you're feeling.
And there's just so much frustration in this scene, you know, and I think there's a double meaning to that frustration, because on one hand he's frustrated that Rita's dead, that even though he killed Trinity, Arthur Mitchell, that still didn't help because she's dead, you know, and there's that frustration there, but there's also a different kind of frustration. There's this frustration that he wants to express it more, that he wishes he was the person Rita wanted him to be, and that frustrates him too at the same time, that he can't be that person, well, not yet anyway. And I love that. I absolutely love that. Next is probably one of my favorite plot lines in all of the seasons of Dexter, one with Lumen. I know a lot of people didn't like season 5. I think it's partially because it is placed right after a season with really high stakes, that is season 4. Just like what happened with season 3 after season 2. But actually I have deep appreciation for both season 3 and season 5, and I absolutely love Lumen as a character. And oh, how I wished that Lumen and Dexter would be together. That would be amazing, but a lot of the time things, well, don't exactly go as we wish in this series. Now, in the context of emotions, I think there's something interesting going on there with Lumen and Rita, because I think Lumen is a sort of a different example for both Rita and Lila. As I said, with Rita, it's sort of a queer platonic relationship that it eventually become, whereas with Lila, it's this intense, impulsive sexual attraction that he's experiencing for the first time. I think Lumen is more of a classic case of what happens when most normal people fall in love, you know. There's not this chase for the sexual impulsiveness there, but there's also not that slow burn of platonic love when you develop those feelings for someone slowly over time. Normal is precisely what I choose to call it, because we are sort of seeing Dexter becoming more normal at this point in the way he forms a relationship, with women at least. And once again we see Dexter hurt when Lumen decides to leave him after he helped her kill her captives. Makes me think that Lumen sort of used Dexter in a way. I'm not sure how genuine her feelings for Dexter were in that case. I think you could say that Dexter was more in love with Lumen than Lumen was with Dexter. That's my way of seeing it, at least. And here, there's something nice about the way he reacts to her leaving. There's this usual reaction we get from Dexter now, where this suppressed sadness manifests itself through anger.
Don't go. You can't.
I don't want to.
And don't. Stay here.
I can't do it anymore. What we've been doing.
You don't have to.
But you do. Right? We both know that. It's who you are.
Which is actually sort of a sociopathic trait, to be completely honest. Let's not forget that there's still that pathological element in Dexter, and we shouldn't ignore that, even though he's becoming more normal. But after that initial reaction of sadness into anger, we see this subtlety in his facial expression when he tells her, it's okay.
I'm so sorry.
Don't be. Don't be sorry your darkness is gone. I'll carry it for you. Always. I'll keep it with mine.
And I think it's all in that subtlety, where it's no longer just this feeling of anger and frustration that he's expressing, but he's also expressing a feeling of pain in a more human, more normal way. Just, it's not done in this overly dramatic way. It's in subtlety. And keep that in mind, because subtlety is going to become a very important theme in this video later on. Now, I want to fast forward a bit. I'm going to jump over season 6, although the importance there is, of course, the continued development of his relationship with his son, Harrison. But I think a turning point for Dexter is Hannah McKay, a character I'm not a big fan of, to be honest, but on my third rewatch of the show, I sort of started to appreciate her in a way that I may not like her, but I can see why she's right for Dexter. And I think it's very similar to Dexter's feelings towards Quinn and a conversation they had in season 8. Like, we know he doesn't like Quinn, but he wants what's best for his sister. Now, I think Hannah hits that sweet spot between Lumen and Layla, where there's this element of sexual impulsiveness, this element of, hey, this is someone dangerous, there's something fun about it, that thrill-seeking thing that's there, but there's also that more humanly development of falling in love, similar to what we've seen in Lumen. So we have this combination of the two, which actually makes me think that Dexter is even more normal at this point, because this is also how it often happens for normal people. There's this combination of these two elements a lot of the time. So we see that it's sort of becoming a whole picture now. Dexter is sort of becoming whole at this point. Now, I want to switch attention towards Harry.
No, you've made a mistake, I mean...
Because at first we see Dexter as someone who's a devoted follower of Harry, in a way, where he just accepts everything Harry told him as true. It was originally his brother Brian that started to pierce through that bubble Dexter was living in, when Dexter realized, hey, maybe not everything Harry told me was true. Although, of course, Brian Moser had his own agenda there. His intention wasn't exactly genuine, but it doesn't change the fact that in some ways he was right. Throughout the original show, we see Dexter distancing himself from Harry and what Harry taught him about him, Dexter. But I also think Dexter has some deep appreciation for him, which explains why Harry is represented as Dexter's monologue, starting from season 3. So I think there are very conflicted feelings Dexter has towards Harry. And eventually, Dexter learns that, hey, you know what? Things might have turned out differently if Harry didn't happen. Maybe, I just needed help. I didn't need to be taught how to kill, how to clean a kill room, how to dispose of the bodies and all of that. Perhaps, Dexter could have been helped if he actually was sent to therapy, assuming he had a really, really good doctor therapist, because those are kind of rare, to be honest. And in season 8, which I think is kind of an awful season, but there's an aspect of season 8 I like, and that is the contrast between season 1 Dexter and season 8 Dexter, where Dexter has become aware that he has those feelings, that he's not this boy of wood. The wooden boy, the Pinocchio, has become a real boy at this point. And I think that's the real story of Dexter, which to me means I think the story could just end there at season 8 and didn't have to continue. And then there's the character of Vogel, which was sort of behind the creation of Dexter. Dexter is, and she's surprised when she actually met Dexter, because she was expecting this perfect psychopath who is not limited by human emotions, who's just cold and calculated, an apex predator. And in some ways I do think that Dexter is an apex predator, but he's a predator that also is capable of feelings, sort of like a cat, They will be an apex predator when they're going after a mouse or a bird, but after that, when they want to cuddle with you, well, that's a completely different story. And I think that's what Dexter has basically become at this point. A cat. And there's this scene in season 8 that I really like, when Dexter says that he loves Deb. But Vogel is like, what do you mean by that? Like, you're not capable of loving. And eventually Vogel actually comes to realize that the feelings Dexter is experiencing are in fact genuine. His feelings for Deb, his feelings for Hannah, his feelings for his son. And she realizes, you know, he is not that perfect psychopath I imagined. And at this point Vogel realizes maybe she was wrong. Maybe everything Vogel and Harry did was wrong. And at the very end of season 8 we have another tragedy. And I think this is the point where Dexter comes to this realization, you know, that to experience something, it was this whole journey throughout the season was that he just wanted to be normal, to experience those things normal people experience. But then there's this realization, was it all worth it? Because shit, it sucks, right? It was much easier when he didn't feel any of that, and now that it's all floating on the surface, it's just too overwhelming. And I'm not surprised, because when you've been living under this sort of emotional repression for so many years, it can be absolutely devastating at that point. And the Dexter we see at the end of season 8 is the devastated Dexter. So it's weird to me when some people who have watched this show make claims that Dexter doesn't feel any feelings, that Dexter doesn't feel any empathy. I think we see him express empathy throughout many times in the show. Even some examples I gave as him saving that kid. I think he especially has a selective empathy towards kids. In particular, we also see a perfect example of that in Original Sin, but also those close to him. But sometimes even strangers, as is an example in both Resurrection and New Blood, but also in season 2. Because when Dexter chose to go after the car dealer in season 2, after the investigation into the Bayhawk Butcher case started, he was thinking like, I should be laying low at this point, but he still chooses to go for that kill because, well, otherwise that woman that he was after, that was supposed to be his next victim, would die. So he was taking a risk there. And you could say it is in some ways a justification, that he's trying to find a moral justification why he should kill. As is, I think, a very significant part of his conversation with Lundy in that tent. But I think it's deeper than that. I think there's also an element of empathy there. Throughout this entire show, I have seen Dexter express more feelings than I have seen many men in my life express. And not all, obviously. Some men can be quite emotional. I'm very emotional myself. I feel very strong feelings, especially when I'm listening to music or eating food, or when I'm talking, writing, or thinking about philosophy, or when something bad happens to people in my life, and sometimes absolute strangers. But I realize I'm sort of an outlier, because for most men, and I'm not sure if it's nature or nurture, if it is in most men's nature to just not experience feelings to that degree, or if it's just social conditioning for men to not show their feelings. I think it's a mix of two. I think some people can be more emotional than others, and women can have a tendency to be more emotional on average, but then I have seen women who didn't share a single tear for their husband, and I've also seen examples of men who didn't feel anything when their wives died, or their mothers, things like that. Or maybe it's wrong of me to say they didn't actually feel it, because I can't know that, really, you know. I don't have access to what's in here. And that's the difference with shows like Dexter, because we hear Dexter's monologue. But in real life, we don't, right? You hear only your own monologue. And so, if I can go only by what I'm seeing, I have seen a stone-faced reaction to news of people's wives and mothers and fathers dying. People not showing a single feeling during a funeral. And so here comes the question. Is Dexter really that pathological in his inability to experience feelings? I don't think so, really. Because when Rita died, when Dexter just shut down completely, that is still more of an emotional response than a lot of what I have seen in real life. And most of the time in real life you don't really see very dramatic sort of expressions of emotions. Real life is not theatrical in that way. Sure, there are some experiences that in that particular moment can make you feel something very intense, but those are quite rare, to be honest. Most of the time, throughout those intense episodes, you're just traveling through the sea of subtlety. Feelings that a lot of the time we don't even have names for. And I think that is something Harry absolutely failed to teach Dexter. Dexter has this understanding of feelings as those intense episodes. That's what he's imagining, but in fact he's feeling a range of different feelings existing in between, existing within that subtlety. So I think Dexter has been living with very wrong impression of what feelings are, because he has this perception that it's just those intense moments, but he doesn't realize that everything else, that he's actually feeling all of that, but he doesn't think so because he doesn't know what it is. Because Harry created a sort of very romanticized picture of the emotional layer of human experience, which Dexter doesn't quite understand. Partially due to his trauma. And it always bothered me that Harry had this picture of a normal person that he was trying to sell Dexter. But I think Dexter was sort of seeing the structure of that normal system he was creating for himself, but I don't think he truly understood it. Not in a way Harry sold it to him. And I think in a lot of advice that Harry told Dexter, there's this element of romanticization. And even sort of like a mythical aspect to it, especially when Harry was telling Dexter about women, how women are those deeply emotional beings that can sense if there's something with you, that if you're not feeling those things. Sure, there are individuals like that. But you can't really tell that this is standard female experience. And so no wonder that Dexter actually believed he couldn't feel those things if they've been sold to him as something heavenly, unapproachable in a way, instead of actually teaching him about that subtlety. And I'm thinking maybe it's because we have been so used to the fact that in most films and TV shows, the expression of feelings and emotions has been kind of over the top and over dramatized.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
I mean, that's what really sells in that format, and Hollywood really did cash in on that. And it all really boils down to that tradition of theater. Because if you want to portray certain emotions on the stage, where most people sitting there won't see your face up close, well, you can't really express those feelings with subtlety alone. You have to over-dramatize it, right? Like the Greeks had a solution for that. Masks that show very clear expressions of certain emotions. But the film doesn't really have to rely on that because, well, you can have a camera zoomed in on the face, you see certain details, there are different camera shots and perspectives, and so acting in the film isn't the same as acting in a theater, on a stage, but some of that over-dramatization remained because it's what really sells. And I think Dexter is sort of an antithesis to that, because he just relies on the subtlety alone, which is exactly what most real-life people are doing. And I'm also thinking it's interesting because when you juxtapose Dexter with his sister Deb, you see this clear contrast there, because Deb is all about expressing feelings in this loud, over-the-top way.
I'm broken.
You're not. I am. Why don't we go back to the house?
Don't. I need to be here. Or Lundy died. I can't do a fucking thing about it.
I mean, there's probably no one on this show who's as emotional as Deb. She has more La Pasión than Señor La Pasión himself. Now, where does that leave us when it comes to resurrection and the future direction for this character? Because, like I said at the start of this video, Resurrection is acting in a way as if Dexter is beginning to have those feelings, that he's developing them. But as we've explored throughout this video, this is really nothing new. We're exploring the same ground, we're doing the same shit all over again here. And I'll be honest when I say that it bothers me that at this point, Dexter is sort of idealizing Harry again. And I've seen it both in New Blood and in Resurrection, when he talks to Harrison and he tells him that he's basically this monster that has been tamed through Harry, that Harry gave him a code. But this actually goes against the whole revelation Dexter had throughout episode 1 to 8. Like, sure, I think Deb's death has been traumatic enough to set Dexter back a little, but I don't think it would actually make him go back to that old way of thinking present in season 1. Yes, he realized that he can't really have his dream life being what he is, you know, what his past was. But I just think it's very unrealistic for someone to turn all that progress into nothing. Also, another important point is to understand Dexter's desire to kill as sort of an addiction. They first alluded to that already in season 2 when Rita's starting to suspect that Dexter is an addict, and he tells her a little white lie, or, well, technically not entirely, more like a small grain of truth. Yes, I have an addiction, he says, and he's sent to rehab. And I think it makes perfect sense, because later in season 7, when Deb is trying to help Dexter to control it, to stop killing, she's also referring to it as kind of an addiction. And there are many examples throughout the show where Dexter believes he doesn't need it anymore. Particularly in season 2, season 8, and basically the space between season 8 and New Blood, where Dexter hasn't killed for 10 years or so. And now, moving on to Resurrection again, it seems that this entire journey for Dexter understanding his feelings finally hasn't had any payoff, because, well, we're back to where we started, we're at this point where Dexter is kind of discovering it all over again.
That doesn't even make sense.
And I think there's a simple explanation for why we are seeing this. And I think the fault of that is the fans of this show. Like, I'm sorry, but a lot of the fans love the old Dexter. You know, they kind of want that dark Dexter from season 1, maybe 2, back. But considering his character development, it doesn't really make much sense when it comes to the arc of this character. Because, you know, at the very end of Resurrection, Dexter is addressing the audience. And he's addressing exactly those fans. Like, I'm exactly who you want me to be, right? And it's because the fans were not happy with a certain direction. They wanted that Dexter back. But the thing is, it seemed kind of weird to me when Dexter came back from a coma and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna hunt down serial killers. Because we have seen a certain progress of his character where he doesn't really necessarily feel that need to kill, but he knows he's capable of it, and he will if the situation calls for it. In many ways, in the later seasons and the New Blood, his skills were more impulsive rather than planned, as we have seen in those older seasons. When he kills Hannah's father, it's purely impulsive. That guy who shot that white deer, it was impulsive. Although he attacked him impulsively, but then I think he wanted to kill him because he hasn't done it for such a long time, and it just seemed very tempting in that moment. But most of the kills we have seen in New Blood, it's just purely down on impulse or necessity, as he would explain it. For instance, he doesn't plan to go after serial killers. Instead, he decides to go after people such as the dealer who sold the drugs that Harrison took and ended up overdosing, possibly being at the risk of death in that situation. And that is an impulsive emotional response. It's very similar to what we're seeing in Harrison in Resurrection. When Harrison kills the guy at the hotel, it is done purely out of impulse. He also has that impulse to kill the landlord, even though he controls himself. And I think this is very reflective of the Dexter we have seen in later seasons. And so, as much as I appreciate this back to the roots direction, I'm not entirely convinced that it doesn't hurt the overall character arc. Because, you know, I think there are many different fans of this show. You know, there are fans who don't want Dexter to get caught and they just want him to continue to kill. And then there are those who do want him caught. I'm a very different breed of a fan, to be honest, because I want Dexter to overcome his addiction. Now, from a purely utilitarian perspective, I would absolutely want Dexter to continue killing. He's really effective at getting rid of some people who do really, really horrible things. And in the same way that we need cats to control the mice population, and in the same way that we need spiders to control the population of certain insects, I think in the same way the world also needs people like Dexter, to be completely honest, to control the population, let's say, of predators and killers and overall really horrible people. However, I don't necessarily think that utilitarianism is the best ethical system there is. And I will never take utilitarianism over the fact that this addiction that Dexter has is actually in many ways contributing to ruining his life and the life of people around him. So many innocent people have suffered because of that. And don't get me wrong, I love Dexter. I love this character. He's very, very relatable, and I don't usually ever relate to characters, but I do relate to Dexter. Not that I'm a serial killer, although, well, can you really be sure? You see those eyes? Those eyes of a serial killer? And because I love Dexter, I want him to grow. And just seeing him go back to that is the very opposite of growth. And it sort of makes me sad and also makes me worry about the future direction of this show. Because as much as I loved old Dexter, we can't really have it back. In the same way that you can't have yourself back from 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Because, well, you're still the same person. Your needs have changed. You have new experience, new perspectives, and you can't really go back to the kind of life you were living back in the past. You would probably not even really enjoy it. Again, that does not mean that I disliked the new show. I think it was pretty decent, pretty entertaining for what it was, but I'm just sharing my concerns as a fan who has been watching this series for a very long time. If you enjoyed that, consider liking this video and subscribing. I don't make a lot of content speaking on TV series and films. I do it sometimes, but it's a weird channel where I basically talk about everything that interests me, because I can't really do one thing all the time. I get really bored with that. I need to stimulate myself with many different things. And sometimes that's philosophy, other times that's, well, Dexter. Alright, I hope you have a really good day, and like I said, I will be ranking every single episode of Dexter there is so far. Have a good day, and I'll see you soon. Ciao.